So it's finally time to start actually working on the 918, and the first things I did was glue on the rear bumper and the front bumper, and I'm using some Plastruct. This is a plastic adhesive. You just put the parts together, drop some of the glue in, and it zips in between the seams, and it just bonds them together really well. Now be careful when using this on a painted surface, as this will bite into the paint, so it's not recommended. Since I've already glued on the rear bumper, I ran into a small problem with the rear spoiler, as you need to put that in between the rear bumper and the rear body panels, so you can position it either up or down. But as I always like to glue on the bumpers before paint to prevent it from getting ugly when gluing them on, I'm just gluing those bumpers on before paint, and then having the spoiler in the highest position by gluing some plastic card on the backs or on the inside of where the spoiler goes in. With the spoiler figured out, I found out that some of the panel lines were really shallow and needed a lot more depth in it. So I started by scribing them out all around the body and then moving on to a small bit of body work. With the panel lines now a lot deeper and a bit wider and looking like they should, I moved on to applying a bit of filler to the areas where I glued in the pieces behind the doors to fill that gap up and make it look like it should. While the filler is still wet, I'm pulling away the masking tape and cleaning out the panel line a bit before the putty fully sets up and hardens and makes it a lot easier to keep a clean panel line. Now, by gluing on the rear and front bumper, you kind of run into a problem when you come to final assembly, as the chassis does not really fit onto it properly anymore, as it's a bit too tight. So a friend of mine suggested to cut off the front diffuser or splitter, I'm not really sure what it's called, and before doing that, drilling some small holes for locator pins, so it's easier later on when it's going to be glued back on. So with these holes drilled, I could start scribing away on those panel lines to separate the front from the rest of the body. the scribing finished and the piece separated from the front bumper, I needed to do a bit of cleanup with some sandpaper just to clean both surfaces up and make them look a bit tidier, and then I could move on to test fitting it and putting those pins in. With the locator pins glued in, I test fitted the front splitter or diffuser and then sanded those pins flush with the underside of the diffuser. So with that all fitting nice and tidy, I did a quick test fit with the chassis on it and putting the front splitter on it to see how that fit and if it worked, and it ended up really working nicely. With all those body modifications now completed, I could start sanding down the filled up areas between the doors and the part that I glued in behind that, and then I moved on to marking and removing all of the mold lines. Now that all those mold lines are removed, there were a couple of panel lines that still needed some scribing, so I did that and then just moved around the entire body to give it a nice scuff up with some 600 grit sandpaper for the primer to really bite onto the body properly. So everything is now fixed, cut and shaped and filled and sanded smooth and scuffed up a bit, so it's ready for primer.